You might have heard before that differential pairs don't necessarily need a return plane. Well, that's definitely incorrect. Differential pairs are simply two single-ended transmission lines brought closer together to improve their coupling. If you remove the return plane underneath the diff pairs, the electromagnetic field is going to spread further to get to its return zero, and that's going to increase your impedance. I'll be demonstrating this on a differential pair that I showed you how to route in a previous video, so you may want to check out that video. And I'll be simulating the effects using Security X Aurora in the Allegro X PCB layout environment. Let's see what happens. So first, let's analyze this PCB with the return planes intact. This is a 6-layer PCB stack-up where I routed 100 ohm differential impedance traces for the site-up protocol. Here we have a ground plane right underneath the top layer where I routed my diff pairs. And this is the copper shape for that ground plane on layer 2. If I go to Analyze Workflow Manager, then choose the impedance workflow, I can load my results from a previous simulation. And here we go. We have our expected single-ended impedance, which translates to a differential impedance of double that. And we are within an acceptable range in that blue. We're nice and low. The impedance increases as we neck down, which is to be expected. But this is all still over a solid return. If we look at the impedance tables, we are hovering around the 48 ohm, up to 60 ohm at worst single-ended impedance for our traces. So let's go ahead and remove this return plane. Here we select that, right-click and delete it. Now the only thing that's left is the layer 5 ground return plane. Return plane for layer 2 is completely gone. We rerun the simulation in the impedance workflow, select all of our nets. Okay, so those are selected. Then start our new analysis. The simulation's done, and let's take a look at the impedance visions. All right, instead of staying in the blue, our differential pair at the top here, this is on the top layer of the PCB, they jump way up from 45 ohms on the single and the traces straight up to 140 ohms, 139, 140 ohms for the, our max impedance on this thing is 152 ohms with an average of 139 ohms on these traces. This is pretty insane. I mean, I expected this, but I didn't expect that high of a jump. And then here are traces. The impedance is even higher at 189 just ohms. And then your max impedance, 152 ohms differential. Yeah, that jumps up. Well, a single-ended, that jumps up to about 300 ohms differential. That is 3 times our target differential impedance for these traces for the protocol. Not good. If I look at the inner layer differential pair traces, so right here, if this was routed on the top of the PCB, but then I took my vias, came down, look at that. These differential trace here, it goes down in the 3D view, like down a layer. I expect the impedance to be higher, but it's still nowhere near that 48 to 50 ohms on a single, each single-ended impedance on my diff pair. That's still almost double. It just so happens that the blue is still significantly higher than my previous simulation. Okay, so clearly that's a problem. This proves my point. You need that return plane underneath your differential pair. Okay, so we've demonstrated that that doesn't work very well. I've reset my PCB and we're gonna add a slot underneath the differential pair. So right around here, let's add a keep out. Let's go to shape and I'll do a manual void or cavity that's rectangular and it's going to be on the second layer ground. The net will need to be ground, of course, and then we're going to start drawing that. So I will place a rectangle. Let's make it 300 mils by 300 mils. Let's see what happens. Hit done. Matter of fact, let's place another manual void cavity here. And our net's going to be ground cavity. I'll change this to 100 on the width, so it's a nice little slot here. Let's go ahead and place a more narrow void. So let's go to shape, manual void, rectangular. And here I'll choose the ground net, click, and then I will change the width to 100 ohms. Matter of fact, let's change this to 50 mils and then place it right underneath that differential pair. Okay, I'll save this. rerun my simulation, go to Analyze Workflow Manager, go down into the impedance workflow, make sure all our nets are selected. They are, and then rerun that analysis. Let's see what happens. All right, so if we view the impedance vision, look at that jump up in the impedance. Also notice that because we placed our return plane back, the impedance is extremely low, 48 ohms, just like we planned for and calculated for. And then the impedance immediately jumps up to 139 ohms on each of the traces, and the slot as well. That makes sense because the electromagnetic field is moving at the speed of light on the PCB surface and roughly half the speed of light if you're an FR4 within a PCB. So the effects are going to be instantaneous. This is what happens when you don't have that return path underneath the differential pair. You're going to get an increase in impedance that's going to cause your communication protocol to not work on that differential pair. Also, when the return plane is gone from underneath the diff pair or it's very far away, the most dominant coupling effects are not just that one signal trace is close to the other and they couple to each other. No, what's going to dominate more is the fact that the overall return path for the electromagnetic field is going to be far away. So that's actually going to dominate the impedance between the diff pair. On a real board, that could be a power net, that could be a power plane, the other transmission line in the diff pair, or nothing at all. Now, at low speeds, the consequences of not having a return path for your differential pair may be minimal, and you can possibly get away with that at those slower speeds. But when you're getting into higher speed protocols like SATA, USB 3, PCIe, and DDR, the consequences are not small. So route over a continuous ground plane always.